Zethkara walked through the great library on Nexus Station. Her 4 eyes moved slowly across the endless rows of data crystals. Each crystal held the history of 1,000 worlds. She was looking for something simple today. Her teacher had asked her to write about dead species. Species that had tried to reach the stars but failed. The Galactic Confederation was proud of its success. 12 different alien races had joined together 3,000 years ago. They had built the greatest empire the galaxy had ever seen. Wars were things of the past. Now, when 2 species had problems, they talked. They made deals. They never fought. Zethkara was a young luminary. Her people had bright blue skin that glowed softly in the dark. They were known across the galaxy for being very smart. The luminari had joined the Confederation 800 years ago. Since then, they had helped solve many problems with their wisdom. She touched a crystal with her long finger. Information flowed into her mind like water. The first file she opened was about the Krill Empire. They had been a warrior race that loved to fight. They had destroyed their own planet in a great war. Very sad, but not unusual. The second file was about the Zen Muri. They had tried to upload their minds into machines. Something went wrong. Their bodies died, but their minds became trapped in computers forever. Also sad, but the third file made. Her Stop Walking. The title was strange. Homo sapiens status, extinct or maybe never real. She opened the file with curiosity. What she saw inside confused her greatly. There were stories from many different species, but all the stories were different. Some said these humans were real. Others said they were just stories told to children. The Kethmer had legends about pale demons. These demons could live anywhere. Hot planets, cold planets, planets with poison air. Nothing could kill them. They would appear when the Kethmer were in great danger. They would help win battles. Then they would disappear like smoke. The Sirathi were fish-like creatures who lived in water. Their old stories spoke of dry walkers. These beings could not breathe water, but they controlled fire. The Sirathi said fire was the most dangerous thing in the universe. How could any species use it as a weapon? But the strangest stories came from the vegans. The vegans were very old. They had been traveling between stars for 5,000 years. Their records were usually very good, but their human stories made no sense. The vegans wrote about ships that looked wrong. These ships were not smooth and curved like normal spaceships. They were sharp and angular. They looked like weapons made into ships. The ships moved without any engines that the vegans could see. They would appear from nowhere. They would fight beside the vegans against pirates. Then they would vanish again. One vegan captain had written, "The humans came to us when the Bloodfang Raiders attacked. Our colony. We were losing. Our shields were failing. Our weapons were almost empty. Then space itself seemed to tear open. 3 human ships came through the tear. They were black like the space between stars. They moved like living things. The human ships destroyed the entire raider fleet in minutes. Their weapons made no sound, but they cut through raider shields, like they were not there. After the battle, I tried to thank them. One of the human captains appeared on my screen. She had pale skin and small eyes. She looked tired, like she had been fighting for a very long time. She said only a few words. The Bloodfangs will not trouble you again. Vegan friends are safe friends. Then her image disappeared. The 3 ships flew into another tier in space. We never saw them again. Zethkara reads story after story like this. Humans helping other species in impossible situations. Humans with technology that made no sense. Humans who could fight in ways that no other species could understand. But there was a problem. If humans were real, where were they now? The Confederation had mapped every star system for 1,000 light years in all directions. They had found 12 species that could travel between stars. They had found hundreds of species that were still learning to build machines. But they had never found any humans. The galaxy was a big place, but not that big. If humans had ships that could travel between stars, someone would have seen them. The Confederation's long-range sensors watched every part of space. They would notice ships moving from system to system. Zethkara felt frustrated. She was good at solving puzzles, but this puzzle had too many missing pieces. Maybe the humans had destroyed themselves like the Krill Empire. Maybe they had become machines like the Zen Morty. Maybe they had never been real at all. She was about to close the file when she found one more record. It was very old and written in a language she did not know, but the computer translated it for her. It was from a species called the Ancients. The Ancients had disappeared before the Confederation was formed. No one knew what had happened to them. The ancient record was different from all the others. It was not a story or a legend. It was a warning. To any who find this message, beware. The things that come from the dark between galaxies. They eat worlds and leave nothing behind. They have done this before. They will do it again. When they return, only the humans can stop them. The humans remember what the rest of the galaxy has forgotten. War is not politics. War is survival. The humans understand this. Find them before the Devourers return, or all will be lost. Zethkara read the message 3 times. It made her feel cold inside. What were these Devourers? What did the Ancients mean about humans remembering something? She tried to find more ancient records, but there were none. The Ancients had vanished without leaving any other clues. She closed the file and walked away from the crystal. Her assignment was supposed to be simple. Write about dead species. But now she had found something that might not be dead at all. Something that might be very important. Outside the library windows, she could see the lights of 1,000 ships. Merchants and diplomats from every Confederation world. They all believed that peace would last forever. They believed that the galaxy was safe because they were all friends now. But what if they were wrong? What if something was coming that their friendship could not stop? What if they needed the humans from the old stories? The humans who fought like demons and used fire as a weapon? Zethkara decided to keep looking. Her teacher wanted a simple report about dead species. But maybe she had found something more important. Maybe she had found a mystery that could save the galaxy. She just hoped she was wrong about the warning. She hoped the Devourers were just another old story. But deep in her heart, she was afraid that some old stories were true. The next day, she would return to the library. She would search every file, every record, every legend. She would try to find the truth about the humans. Because if the Ancients were right, the galaxy would need all the help it could get. And maybe, just maybe, the humans were still out there somewhere, waiting in the dark between the stars, watching and preparing for the day when legends would need to become real again. Admiral Sarah Chun stood at the big window of her ship and looked out at the stars. Her ship was called UEC. It was one of the biggest ships in the human fleet. Through the thick glass, she could see hundreds of other ships being built in the space yards around New Geneva. The space yards were like a giant factory in space. Robot arms moved back and forth, welding metal and installing engines. Sparks flew in all directions as workers in spacesuits checked every detail. Some ships were small and fast like metal sharks. Others were huge and powerful like floating mountains. Sarah had been watching the ships being built for 3 years now. Every day, more ships joined the fleet. Every day, humanity grew stronger. But she wondered if they would be strong enough for what was coming. 800 years ago, humanity had almost died. They had just learned to travel between stars when they met their first aliens. The Zilithian horde was a race of creatures that looked like giant bugs. They lived to fight and conquer. When they found Earth, they saw weak creatures that would be easy to defeat. The Zilithians were wrong, but almost right. Humans were not as advanced as the aliens. Human ships were slower. Human weapons were weaker. But humans had something the Zilithians did not expect. They never gave up. The war lasted 50 years. The Zilithians destroyed Earth's first colonies. They killed billions of humans. They pushed humanity back to their home system again and again. But each time the Zilithians won a battle, the humans learned something new. Humans learned to build better ships. They learned to fight in ways the Zilithians could not predict. Most importantly, they learned that sometimes the only way to win was to be more willing to die than your enemy was. The war ended when human ships found the Zilithian home world. The aliens expected the humans to try to conquer it. Instead, the humans used a weapon that cracked the planet in half. The entire Zilithian leadership died in minutes. The war was over. After the war, humanity made a decision. They would never be caught weak again. They moved their colonies to the edge of the galaxy where no one would look for them. They spent the next 800 years building ships and learning to fight. They prepared for the day when something worse than the Zilithians would come. Captain Torres walked up behind Sarah. He was a young man with dark hair and serious eyes. He had been Sarah's helper for 2 years. He was smart and brave, but he had never fought in a real war. Very few humans had fought in real wars anymore. Peace was good, but it made people soft. "Admiral," Torres said quietly, "we have a problem. The long-range sensors have found something." Sarah turned away from the window. The look on Torres's face told her this was not a small problem. "Show me," she said. Torres touched a button on his wrist. The air in front of them shimmered and became a star map. It showed the galaxy like a giant spiral of light. The blue areas were Confederation space, where 12 alien species lived in peace. The green areas were neutral space, where smaller species lived. The red areas were unknown space that no one had explored. But now there were new marks on the Vince map, black dots moving through the red areas toward the blue ones. As Sarah watched, more black dots appeared. They were moving fast and in straight lines toward inhabited systems. "What are they?" Sarah asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. "Unknown ships, Admiral. But the computer has been analyzing their movement patterns. They match something in our historical database." Torres touched another button. Words appeared in the air. "Alert. Movement pattern matches 87% with devourer swarm behavior. Recommend immediate defensive preparations." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. The devourers were in the old human records from before the Zilithian War. They were worse than any enemy humanity had ever faced. They did not conquer planets. They ate them. They turned entire star systems into more of themselves. Humanity had first detected devourer activity at the very edge of the galaxy 900 years ago. The signals had stopped suddenly. Everyone hoped the devourers had died out or moved to another galaxy. But the old record said that devourers never died. They only slept until they found new food. How long until they reached Confederation space? Sarah asked. Torres checked the numbers. At their current speed, about 6 months. Until they hit the outer colonies. Maybe 18 months before they reached the core worlds. Sarah nodded slowly. She had hoped this day would never come. But humanity had been preparing for it anyway. 800 years of preparation. It was time to find out if it had been enough. "Send a message to Earth Command," Sarah ordered. "Tell them the devourers are back. Tell them to begin Operation Rising Sun." Operation Rising Sun was humanity's plan for fighting the devourers. It had been worked out by the best human minds over many centuries. It was complex and dangerous, but it was their only hope. "Admiral," Torres said carefully, "what about the Confederation? Should we warn them?" Sarah looked back at the star map. The Confederation species were peaceful. They had not fought a real war in thousands of years. Their ships were built for exploration and trade, not for battle. If the Devourers reached them first, it would be a massacre. But if humanity revealed itself too early, the Confederation might panic. They might try to fight the Devourers in the wrong way. Or worse, they might try to negotiate with them. You could not negotiate with creatures that saw all other life as food. Not yet, Sarah decided. Let the Confederation discover the threat on their own. When they realize they cannot handle it alone, then we will reveal ourselves. We will come to them as saviors, not as strangers. Torres looked uncomfortable. "Admiral, a lot of innocent people will die if we wait." "A lot more will die if we act too soon," Sarah replied. "The Confederation needs to understand how serious this threat is. They need to be desperate enough to accept our help without asking. Too many questions." Sarah walked back to the window and looked out at the ships again. Each one represented years of human work and planning. Each one carried weapons that could destroy planets. Each one was crewed by humans who had trained their year. Whole lives for a war that might never come. But the war was coming now. And humanity would be ready. The biggest ship in the yards was almost finished. It was called the Vengeance of Terra, and it was the size of a small moon. Its weapons could crack a planet like an egg. Its armor could survive the explosion of a star. It was the most powerful warship ever built by any species in the galaxy. Soon, very soon, the galaxy would remember that humans existed. But they would not remember humans as the weak species from the old stories. They would remember humans as the species that came from the darkness to save them all. Sarah smiled grimly. The Devourers thought they were hunting sheep. They were about to discover they were hunting wolves. "Torres," she said without turning around, "how long until the Vengeance of Terra is ready for battle?" 12 weeks, Admiral. "Make it 8 weeks. And send word to all fleet commanders. Tell them to prepare their crews for the longest war in human history." Torres saluted and walked away quickly. Sarah remained at the window, watching the ships and thinking about the future. The peaceful galaxy was about to learn why humans had legends about war, and the Devourers were about to learn why 800 years of preparation was more dangerous than 800 years of peace. High Admiral Vextai stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his galaxy die. The main screen showed a map of Confederation space. Every day, more red dots appeared on the map. Every red dot meant a star system that had gone silent. Every silent system meant billions of dead people. Vextai was a Kethmer, one of the warrior races that had joined the Confederation long ago. His people had 4 arms and thick gray skin that could stop bullets. They had been soldiers for thousands of years before they learned about peace. But even with all their fighting experience, Vextai had never seen anything like this. The enemy called themselves the Harvesters, but everyone in the fleet called them the Devourers. They did not fight like normal armies. Normal armies wanted to control territory. The Devourers wanted to consume it. A Devourer fleet would arrive at a star system and begin eating everything they found. They would strip the metal from asteroids and use it to build more ships. They would drain the gas from planets and turn it into fuel. Worst of all, they would capture the people living on planets and change them into more DEVOURERS communications. Officer Thale ran up to Vextai. She was a Sirathi, one of the fish-like people who breathed water instead of air. Her gills were flapping quickly, which meant she was very scared. "Admiral," she said in her bubbling voice, "we have lost contact." with the Kepler sector. All 47 star systems are now silent. Vextai's mandibles clicked together loudly. The Kepler sector had been home to over 30 billion people just 1 week ago. Now it was empty space filled with devourer ships. The worst part was how fast the devourers moved. Confederation fleets were scattered across thousands of star systems, trying to protect their home worlds. But the devourers seemed to know exactly where to attack. They would hit 3 systems at once, forcing the Confederation to split their forces. Then they would attack somewhere else while the defenders were traveling to help. How are they doing this? Vextai asked for the 100th time. How do they know where our fleets are? How do they know which systems to hit? His tactical officer, Zenkar, looked up from his instruments. Zenkar was a luminari like the young scholar Zethkara. His blue skin was pale with exhaustion. Admiral, I think they have been watching us for a very long time. Maybe centuries. They know how we think. They know how we fight. They know our weaknesses better than we do. That was the terrifying truth. The Confederation had been peaceful for so long that they had forgotten how to fight a real war. Their ships were beautiful and comfortable, but they were not built for serious combat. Their crews were smart and brave, but they had never faced an enemy that wanted to destroy everything they cared about. The Devourers were different. They had been fighting and eating their way across the galaxy for millions of years. War was all they knew. They had no mercy, no fear, and no limits. They would sacrifice 100 ships to destroy 1 Confederation vessel, because they could always build more ships from the wreckage. "Sir," called out sensor technician Yelinara, "I am detecting a large devourer force moving toward the Rigel system. If they take Rigel, they will control the main shipping route to the core worlds." Vextai looked at the tactical display. The Rigel system was defended by only 20 Confederation ships. The Devourer force had over 200 vessels, including several of their massive hive ships. It would not be a battle. It would be a slaughter. But Vextai had no choice. If Rigel fell, the Devourers would have a clear path to the heart of Confederation space. Billions more people would die. The Confederation itself might collapse. "Signal all ships in the 3rd Defense Fleet," he ordered. "We are going to Rigel. Maximum speed." "Sir," Zenkar said quietly, "even with our ships, we will only have 60 vessels against their 200. The odds are not good." "The odds have not been good since this war started," Vextai replied. "But we are all that stands between the Devourers and innocent people. We have to try." As the Confederation fleet jumped to hyperspace, Vextai thought about his children on the Kethmer home world. They were safe for now, but if he failed here, the Devourers would reach them eventually. There would be nowhere left to run dot in the ship's library. A young analyst named Krendy was working frantically. She had been assigned to search through old records for any information that might help fight the Devourers. Most of what she found was useless. Ancient trade agreements, old diplomatic messages, records of species that had died out long ago. But then she found something interesting in the restricted vegan archives. The vegans were one of the oldest members of the Confederation. Their records went back thousands of years. Usually those records were very boring, but this section was marked Classified Mythological Contacts. Krendy read about strange encounters with unknown ships. Ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Ships that fought with weapons the vegans had never seen before. The crews of these ships called themselves humans. What made Krendy's tentacles curl with excitement was the description of what the humans had been fighting. The vegan records described creatures that consumed entire star systems, creatures that turned matter into more of themselves, creatures that the humans called Star Eaters. The description matched the Devourers perfectly. According to the records, The humans had fought the Star Eaters for many years. The humans had won, but at great cost. After the war, they had disappeared to the edge of the galaxy. The vegans had assumed they were extinct. But what if they were not extinct? What if they were still out there, somewhere beyond the edge of mapped space? Krendy ran through the corridors of the ship as fast as her legs could carry her. She burst onto the bridge, just as the fleet was dropping out of hyperspace near Rigel. "Admiral," she shouted, waving her datapad, "I found something. I found records of a species that fought the Devourers before." Vexed Eye turned to look at her. "What are you talking about?" "Humans, sir. There are old vegan records about humans who fought creatures exactly like the Devourers. They called them Star Eaters. The humans won, sir. They actually beat them." Vexed Eye felt a tiny spark of hope in his chest. "Where are these humans now?" "Unknown, sir. The records say they went to the edge of the galaxy after their war. But, sir, some of these encounters happened less than 1,000 years ago. If they are still alive, they might help us," Vexed Eye finished. "But how do we find them? The galaxy is huge, and we do not even know where to look." On the main screen, the Devourer fleet came into view. 200 black ships shaped like insects, moving in perfect formation toward the Confederation defenders. The human question would have to wait. Right now, Vexed Eye had a battle to fight, but as he gave orders to his fleet, he could not stop thinking about Krendy's discovery. Somewhere out there, maybe, was a species that knew how to fight the Devourers and win. A species that had faced this nightmare before and survived. The Confederation needed a miracle. Maybe, just maybe, the humans were that miracle. "All ships, prepare for battle," Vexed Eye ordered, "and send a general broadcast on all frequencies. Tell any humans who might be listening that the galaxy needs their help. Tell them the Star Eaters have returned." It was a desperate message sent into empty space. Vexed Eye did not really expect an answer. But sometimes, when everything seemed hopeless, desperate messages reached desperate people. And sometimes, just sometimes, legends decided to become real. The space around Rigel looked empty and peaceful. Then it exploded with light and sound as 200 Devourer ships dropped out of hyperspace. They moved in perfect formation, like a pack of metal wolves hunting prey. Each ship was black and sharp, designed only for destruction. Admiral Vexed Eye watched them approach on his main screen. His 60 Confederation ships were spread out in a defensive line. They looked small and weak compared to the Devourer fleet. But they were all that stood between the enemy and innocent people. "All ships, prepare to engage," Vexed Eye ordered. His voice was calm, but his 4 hands were shaking slightly. He had fought many battles in his long career, but never against odds like this. The Devourer ships began to accelerate. Their weapons started glowing with evil red light. In a few minutes, the battle would begin. It would probably be the last battle for many of the Confederation crews. Then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open near the edge of the system. A hole in reality appeared, crackling with blue energy. Through the hole came a ship unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was huge, almost as big as a Devourer hive ship. But where the Devourer ships looked like insects, this ship looked like a weapon. It was sharp and angular, covered in armor that seemed to absorb light. Along its hull, points of blue-white energy pulsed like a heartbeat. "Contact," shouted sensor technician Yulinara. "Unknown vessel bearing mark 77 Alpha. I cannot identify its design or technology." More holes opened in space. More ships came through. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They were smaller than the first ship, but they all had the same predatory look. They moved like living things, flowing around each other in complex patterns. Incoming transmission, announced Communications Officer Thale. Her gills were flapping with excitement. The signal is using old Confederation protocols, but it is much more advanced than anything in our database. The main screen flickered. Suddenly, they were looking at a being none of them had ever seen before. It walked on two legs like some of the younger Confederation species. Its skin was pale, and it had two small eyes instead of the 4 or 6 that most intelligent species had. It was wearing some kind of military uniform. Confederation vessels, the being said. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We have been monitoring your conflict with the Harvesters. We are here to help. The bridge fell completely silent. Every officer stared at the screen in shock. Vextai found his voice first. United Earth ... You are human? We are, Admiral Chun replied. And we have been fighting the Harvesters for 800 years. They use different names, but we know them well. They consumed our first colony worlds before we learned how to fight them properly. As she spoke, the space around the human flagship filled with more ships. The sensors counted 300 vessels, then 400. Each one bristled with weapons that seemed to bend light around them. Impossible, whispered Tactical Officer Zenkar. I am reading over 400 ships, but they appeared from nowhere. Our sensors show no jump signatures, no hyperspace trails. How did they get here? Admiral Chun smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Vextai feel both relieved and afraid. The Harvesters always make the same mistake. They study their prey, learn their weaknesses, adapt their tactics. But they have never faced a species that sees warfare as an art form. Behind the human fleet, space began to tear open again. This time, what emerged made the Confederation officers gasp out loud. A ship the size of a small moon drifted into view. Its hull was covered in structures that pulsed with barely contained energy. Weapon ports large enough to fly smaller ships through lined its sides. The Vengeance of Terra, Chun said casually. Our newest Titan-class dreadnought. She has been waiting 8 centuries for a proper test. The Devourer fleet had stopped advancing. For the first time since the war began, they seemed uncertain. Their perfect formation was wavering as they tried to understand what they were facing. Admiral Chun, Vextai said, we are grateful for your help. But there are over 200 enemy ships, even with your fleet. Admiral Vestai, Chun interrupted. You have been fighting a defensive war. We have been preparing for an offensive one. Watch and learn. The human fleet moved like nothing Vextai had ever seen. The ships flowed around each other like schools of fish, but each movement had deadly purpose. They began to surround the Devourer formation, not in a simple circle, but in a complex 3-dimensional pattern that made Vextai's head hurt to watch. How are they moving like that? Zenkar asked in wonder. Their ships seem to know exactly where every other ship will be. Neural interface systems, Chun explained. Every human ship is connected to every other ship through quantum entanglement. We think as one mind when we fight. The Vengeance of Terra moved to the front of the human formation. Its massive main weapon began to charge with energy that made the very fabric of space shimmer. Other human ships powered up weapons that seemed to violate several laws of physics. The Devourers finally reacted. They broke formation and charged at the human fleet with their usual brutal tactics. They had fought 1,000 species and defeated them all. They expected these new enemies to break and run like all the others. They were very wrong. The Vengeance of Terra fired first. Its main weapon created a beam of pure destruction that did not just destroy the lead Devour hive ship. The ship simply stopped existing, as if it had never been there at all. Around the massive dreadnought, smaller human vessels began what Admiral Chun called harvest protocols. Vextai watched in amazement as human weapons turned the Devourer's own consumption abilities against them. Devourer ships that tried to absorb energy from human weapons found themselves being absorbed instead. Their own feeding instincts became traps that the humans had laid for them. Incredible, breathed Yelanara. They are using the Devourers' biology against them. But it was more than just superior technology. As the battle continued, Vextai saw something that made him understand why these beings had survived their first encounter with galactic civilization. The humans fought with an intensity that was almost frightening, but it was controlled by tactical brilliance and an ability to adapt that seemed almost supernatural. When Devourer ships tried to ram human vessels, the human ships would dance away at the last second and strike from behind. When the Devourers tried to surround individual human ships, those ships would flow back into the formation like water, and the trap would close on empty space. Most impressive of all was how the humans worked together. There was no confusion, no hesitation, no friendly fire. Every ship knew exactly what every other ship was doing. They moved like parts of a single giant organism. The harvesters are retreating, reported Yelanara, her voice filled with disbelief. Indeed, the surviving Devourer ships were pulling back. Their formation was collapsing as more and more ships were destroyed or captured by the human fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, the Devourers were running away. But Admiral Chun held up her hand, and the human advance stopped instantly. "Let them go," she ordered. "You are letting them escape?" Vextai asked, confused. Chun's smile was predatory. "Admiral, you have been fighting a defensive war. We have been preparing for an offensive one. Those ships will carry word back to the main swarm. And while they are doing that, we will be hunting down every hive cluster in their territory." Data streams flowed around Chun's image as she spoke. "You see, Admiral, the harvesters made one critical error. They assumed that because humanity was absent from your records, we were extinct. The human fleet began to form up around the Confederation vessels." Vextai realized he was looking at an escort formation. "We will help you rebuild your defenses," Chun continued. "Share some of our technology. Train your forces in anti-harvester tactics. But in return, we want full membership in the Galactic Confederation. I do not have the authority to—" "You do now," Chun interrupted. "Because in about 6 hours, word of this battle will reach every system in Confederation space. They will want to know who saved them, and they will want us as allies, not distant protectors." As the combined fleet moved toward Confederation space, Vextai found himself looking at the human ships with new understanding. These were not just vessels of war. They were monuments to survival, testaments to a species that had refused to die quietly in the dark. The humans were not returning to the galactic stage as refugees or beggars. They were coming back as the predators they had always been, shaped by centuries of preparation into something that could stand against the void itself. The galaxy would never forget them again. The Battle of Rigel lasted 17 hours. In the first 17 minutes, everything changed. Admiral Vextai stood on his bridge and watched the human fleet destroy 200 Devourer ships with terrible efficiency. He had fought in many battles during his long career, but he had never seen anything like this. The human ships moved like dancers, but they struck like lightning. Where Confederation vessels had struggled against even single Devourer ships, the humans destroyed entire squadrons without taking serious damage. Their weapons seemed to rewrite the laws of physics, and their tactics made no sense until you saw the results. "How?" whispered Communications Officer Fail. "How are they doing this?" Admiral Chun's image appeared on their screen again. She was directing the battle while talking to them, as if destroying hundreds of enemy ships was just another day at work. 800 years of preparation, officer. When you know your enemy will eventually return, you do not just build ships. You remake your entire civilization around the art of war. The human fleet fought with coordination that seemed impossible. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be. Their attacks were perfectly timed, their movements perfectly synchronized. It was like watching a single organism with hundreds of parts, but it was more than just teamwork. As Vextai watched human marines board damaged Devourer vessels, he saw something that explained how these beings had survived their first contact with galactic civilization. They fought with an intensity that was almost inhuman, but it was controlled by intelligence and adaptability that was very human indeed. A Devourer warrior was larger than a human, stronger and covered in natural armor. But the human marines moved faster, fought quicker, and used weapons that turned the Devourer's own biology against them. What should have been hand-to-hand combat became clinical extermination. "The harvesters are retreating," reported sensor technician Yelinara. Her voice was filled with wonder. For the first time since the invasion began, the Devourers were running away. Their perfect formation had collapsed. Nearly half their ships were destroyed or captured. The survivors were fleeing in panic toward the edge of the system. But Admiral Chun raised her hand, and the human advance stopped immediately. "Let them go," she ordered calmly. "You are letting them escape?" Vextai asked. He could not understand why the humans would show mercy to creatures that had killed billions of innocent people. Chun's smile made Vextai's blood run cold. "Admiral, you have been thinking like prey. We think like predators. Those ships will carry word back to the main swarm that something new is hunting them. And while they are doing that, we will be preparing the next phase of our operation." Data flowed around Chun's image like a waterfall of light. "You see, Admiral, we have been tracking Devourer movements for 8 centuries. We know where their breeding worlds are. We know where they store their resources. We know how they think." The human fleet began to form up around the surviving Confederation ships. Vextai realized he was looking at a protective formation. The humans were not just helping them win this battle. They were adopting them. "We will help you rebuild your defenses," Chun continued. "Share some of our technology. Train your forces in anti-Devourer tactics. But in return, we want full membership in the Galactic Confederation." I do not have the authority to make that decision," Vextai said weakly. "You do now," Chun replied with confidence. "Because in about 6 hours, word of this battle will reach every system in Confederation space. They will want to know who saved them, and they will want us as allies, not mysterious saviors." As the combined fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Vextai found himself studying the human ships with new eyes. They were not beautiful like Confederation vessels. They were not elegant or comfortable. They were tools of war, pure and simple, designed by a species that understood violence in ways that peaceful civilizations could not imagine. But they were also something more. Each ship represented decades of human work and planning. Each weapon system was the result of centuries of research and development. Each crew member had trained their entire life for a war that had lasted 800 years. The humans had not just survived their encounter with galactic civilization. They had learned from it. They had taken everything the galaxy could teach them about war and added their own innovations. The result was a military force that could stand against anything the universe could produce. 3 days later, Vextai stood in the Great Assembly Hall on Nexus Station. Representatives from all 12 Confederation species had gathered for an emergency session. The hall was filled with urgent voices speaking in dozens of languages. Everyone wanted to know about the mysterious fleet that had saved Rigeldot. At the center of the hall, a holographic projector showed the battle in perfect detail. Again and again, The assembled delegates watched human ships destroy devourer vessels with impossible ease. Again and again, they saw weapons and tactics that defied everything they thought they knew about space combat. Where did they come from? Demanded Ambassador Crayonex of the Vorthan delegation. How did they know about the attack? Why have we never encountered them before? Vextai stepped forward to address the assembly. His voice carried clearly through the hall's translation systems. Distinguished delegates, I have spent the last 3 days studying the human records. What I have learned changes everything we thought we knew about our galaxy. He activated his personal data display. Ancient records appeared in the air above the assembly. Vegan archives, Cathmer legends, Sirathi myths, all talking about the same mysterious species. Humans have been part of galactic civilization for over 1,000 years. We just never realized it. They have been watching us, helping us, protecting us from threats we never knew existed. The stories our ancestors told about pale demons and dry walkers were not myths. They were history. A young luminary delegate stood up. It was Zeth Kara, the scholar who had first discovered the human records. Her 4 eyes were bright with excitement. Admiral Vextai is correct. I have been researching human contacts for months. They have intervened in at least 50 documented conflicts over the past millennium. Pirates defeated by invisible ships. Slaver fleets that vanished overnight. Entire criminal organizations that simply disappeared. But why? Asked Ambassador Thrender of the Aquatic Council. Why help us without revealing themselves? Admiral Chun's image appeared in the center of the hall. She had agreed to address the assembly directly, speaking from her flagship as it traveled toward human space. Because we learned from our first contact with galactic civilization, she said simply. 800 years ago, we met a species called the Zilithian Horde. They nearly destroyed us. We survived, but only barely. After that war, we decided that the galaxy was not ready for humanity. And now? Asked Ambassador Crayonex. Now the galaxy faces extinction from an enemy we know how to defeat. Now you need us more than you fear us. And now we are ready to take our place among civilized species. The assembly erupted in discussion. Some delegates were grateful for human help. Others were suspicious of their motives. Still others were simply terrified of their military capabilities. But Vextai knew the truth. The Confederation had no choice. The Devourers would return in greater numbers, and when they did, only the humans could stop them. The peaceful species of the galaxy would have to accept their violent protectors, or they would all die together. Over the following weeks, the human fleet began arriving at Confederation worlds. They came not as conquerors, but as teachers. Human. Engineers showed Confederation shipbuilders how to make their vessels more durable. Human tacticians trained Confederation officers in new ways of fighting. Human scientists shared technologies that had been developed specifically for fighting the DEVOURERS. But the most important thing the humans brought was hope. For the first time since the invasion began, the people of the galaxy believed they could win. The Devourers were no longer an unstoppable force of nature. They were just another enemy that could be defeated with enough preparation and determination. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of the Vengeance of Terra and watched human ships spread out across Confederation space. After 8 centuries of isolation, humanity was finally coming home. They were not returning as the primitive species their ancestors had been. They were returning as the most dangerous military force in the galaxy. That the Devourers had awakened something they did not understand. They had forced humanity out of hiding before they were ready to face what humans had become. The galaxy's peaceful species were about to learn why their ancestors had told stories about humans. And the Devourers were about to learn why some legends were better left sleeping. The war was far from over. The main Devourer swarm was still out there, somewhere in the darkness between galaxies. But for the first time in months, the galaxy had hope. And that hope had a name: humanity. Sleeping Giant had awakened. The legends had become real. And the galaxy would never be the same again.